Also, this content is free and accessible to the public. If you haven't joined the Roundtable, we encourage you to do so. Please visit auburndowntown.org and click on the Roundtable tab. This Downtown Auburn bid program is brought to you by Tompkins Trust Company. The program features guest Assemblyman Brian Manktelow and Senator-Elect John Mannion. We will discuss the New York State budget outlook and its impact on local governments, nonprofits, and taxpayers, as well as legislative powers during COVID-19. The program moderator is Guy Constantino, Executive Director of Cayuga Community College Foundation. Welcome, everyone. And Guy, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and we're delighted to have you here for the Wednesday morning roundtable for December, and we'll give you some programming notes at the end about what will be coming up in January and beyond. But one of the things that the steering committee looked at was what will the budget look like come to next year, but also where are we this year? When New York State started its budget back in April on the 1st of 2020, April 1st, 2020, it had what was estimated at that time of $14 billion, that's with a B, shortfall even when they started. And obviously that was only about 15 to 20 days into the COVID-19 crisis. So things have progressed both on the budget front and spending. Things have changed, as well as the powers of the governor during that period of time. And so the Wednesday morning roundtable steering committee thought that it would be great to get a perspective from each house, from the majority and minority of both, to talk to you about what they see is the current state of affairs, what the outlook looks like, and other matters that might come up during the discussion. So we are delighted to have two people who were re-elected and elected about a month ago. Assemblyman Brian Manktelow was re-elected to the New York State Assembly for a second term last month. He's a Republican who represents the northern part of Cayuga County. Among his committee assignments are committees on banks, labor, oversight and analysis and investigation, which may come up in our discussion, as well as the committee on small business. John Mannion, who ran for a second time, and we're saying he is Senator-elect today, but we hope by the time you watch this tomorrow, or excuse me, on Wednesday, he might be senator, depending on which way they do swearing in Albany. But he was elected in November. He is still active in teaching. He is, I think he is teaching from home right now, teaching West Genesee High School as science, if I remember correctly. He will be in the Democratic majority in the Senate, and so we're delighted to have him as well. He will represent the city of Auburn and parts east of Auburn as well. Gentlemen, welcome and congratulations on your respective election and re-election.
Thank you.
Thank you,
So,
guys.
Assemblyman, let me start with you because you have been in the deep thicket of it all since for well 2 years. But as we look right now, what do you and your conference see as the current budget situation that started on April 1st, 2020, not necessarily what you're going to see come 4 months from now?
Well, I think right now there's a lot of unknowns because we don't really know what the numbers are. I know the governor is talking about some numbers, but he's really not sharing that. I'm not sure he has the numbers. Going into the budget, we had that great deficit going into the budget process, and knowing that it was there and moving forward, and then COVID hit, of course. Excuse me. I know he's making budget cuts already. I know he's already pulling dollars from our local municipalities and our schools, 20% cuts. That's already been seen here locally at the grassroots level, at the towns and villages and counties. So I think he's really waiting to find out what's going to happen in Washington and if there's going to be another package coming from them. And hopefully we'll know that soon, whether it's before the end of this presidential term or not. I think the sooner we know that, the sooner we'll know where we're going to go as a state. And I think until we know those numbers, it's pretty hard to really tell in which direction we're going to go. If we don't get those numbers, I think we have to go ahead. Do you want to say something, Guy?
No, I just wanted to know, does your conference think the number is greater than 14 billion at this stage?
I think at this point, I think we'd have to guess it was greater. It was 14 billion going in. with all the
Okay.
expenses and everything that's going on with COVID. I can't see this going to be less for sure. So I would definitely think it would be a little higher.
And for people who don't know, how much is large is the state budget roughly?
It's like around $187 billion.
Okay, so we're talking about, 8-9% at least going in as a shortfall.
Almost.
So, Senator-Elect, I don't know if you have been meeting with your conference, even though you might not be sworn in, but do the Democratic majority have a view of where we are budget-wise for the current fiscal year?
So I have been meeting, and just for informational purposes, we were talking before. My wife is remote teaching. I'm in-person teaching, so I did teach in person today.
Okay.
But I'm happy to hear of the committees that the Assemblyman is on, because I think for the crossover that we have in the area, I'm appreciative that he sits on those committees and can provide insight into trying us to, try to help us get through this. So I look forward to working with him. I have been a part of some of those briefings, and we have heard a number that has come out of the governor's office, which is around that $15 billion number. And from the briefings where I was in, it's about the same. I think where it differs is the concern when we get to year 2 and 3 and 4 is that some of the numbers are not where we, that's where the experts and our finance chair in the majority differ. So, but I think, of course, what we all hope for is that federal stimulus package comes quickly, but we can't count on it. I'm sure the Assemblyman is not counting on it, and we have to prepare accordingly. So I have been briefed in those, we had extensive conversations that went for many hours, and I feel very good about not our budget situation, but I feel good about the information that was provided and trying to make the decisions going forward.
So when you say 15, there's a disagreement on the 15 billion possibly. Is that between the finance chair of the Senate and the executive?
So I think there's a lot of agreement in the 2021, 2022 budget projections, and also 2022, 2023. It's 3 and 4 years down the road. That's where the difference really occurs, in that, what's coming out of the governor's office seems to be more impactful and far-reaching, which, again, to the Assemblyman's point, we got to know where we are right now, and I think there's still some gray areas there.
So you've mentioned stimulus. I think the Assemblyman mentioned stimulus as well. As we tape this at 3:30, 3:45 on Monday, it is expected that another plan will be unveiled. I don't know which version it is in Washington for a stimulus. Do you think there is, and I'm not talking about the partisan part of this, I'm just talking about the reality, will you get a check? Do you each think that you will see federal stimulus money prior to January 20th?
I see the Assemblyman.
Go ahead.
The Assemblyman's not anxious to jump at that, neither am I, because I think we're hopeful. I know that we have strong advocates at the federal level that represent, our area and the entire state. I think they've made it well known that we have not received the necessary help that is needed. I represent parts of Cayuga County, but also large chunk of Onondaga County. And one of the stimulus packages we just missed in Onondaga County. We have 460,000 residents. There were 500, there's, the bar, the benchmark was 500,000 citizens. So as a result, we've got some hurting municipalities in Onondaga County. And of course we do in Cayuga County, because I've been communicating with those folks as well. So I don't want to put a date on it, but I will say that I think that our representatives have made it clear, both out there in the media and to leadership, that we've been passed over and we need it. We need it for sure. So I'm confident. I shouldn't say confident. I'm hopeful that those people are going to continue to do their jobs and that advocacy, and we're going to see something. When we see it, I'm not sure, and we have to plan like we're not going to see it prior to that for sure.
Guy, I'll go right along.
Assemblyman, go ahead.
I'll go along with Senator-Elect that yeah, I'm hopeful too as well. I think I'm hopeful that we will see it. Well, will we see it before January 21st? I'm not sure. I hope so. And as John said, that I think our local Congress and senators are doing a fine job getting that message down in Washington, and we have been overlooked. So I guess at this point we're hopeful, especially going into the new year. I'm hoping and praying that it does come through, because that'll make a difference on what we do in Albany.
So Assemblyman, on the issue of a package, are you looking, do you see the reality, and again, there's a lot of unknowns here, but do you see the package coming out for aid to, forget states, but that would be nice, but do you think it will reach down far enough, because this affects all of your constituents, both of you, school districts, which are scrambling, and we'll get into the governor's 2020 process, and municipalities. Do you think that will be part of the aid project process? Because I know that's been one of the holdups from Senate Republicans in Washington.
I hope it will be. I think that money needs to come through I think the money needs to bypass the state and go directly to our local municipalities, because sometimes when it goes to the state, it gets tied up. And we've seen that with the not-for-profits, where there's money there for the not-for-profits, but the governor's holding on to that, and we're constantly, contacting his office. We need to get that money out. So if it does come through from the federal side, we need to get it directly to the municipalities.
So, Senator, can I follow up on that particular point? You just mentioned the not-for-profits, and I know next month we're going to talk to not-for-profits, for-profits, and businesses tomorrow on COVID-19 and the impact for them. But one of the issues that's come out has been a twofold issue from Albany. One has been what we'll call retainage. They aren't following up with contracts, and they're holding back money. And sometimes they're taking the federal aid that came earlier in the year and using it to pay other items. I think that may be one of the issues with school districts, or they're not telling school districts or community colleges or whoever, you're going to get X number of dollars. From a planning perspective, that stinks. I know there's another word I can use for that, but from a practical purpose of paying bills, where's the state on paying out what they have already approved? So you approved, a budget was, I don't think you voted for the budget back in April, did you? Or
I did not.
you didn't vote for it. So when you voted for a financial plan, much of that has not been carried out because of COVID. How do you backdate that for those districts, school districts, not-for-profits, people have contracts with the states, counties, for example?
Well, we've said this all along. We need to know what the numbers are, because it's not just 2020. There's not-for-profits that haven't got their 2019 money. I was working with one of them a few weeks ago, and they want to know where that money was. Well, that was pre-COVID. That money was there, and why is it not being paid back? And again, we have to look at the administration and say, look, tell us where the dollars are, what are the amounts, and what are we going to do? I'm sure there's a ballpark figure out there where we're at, and for not to be able to do that and present that to our schools, our municipalities, our not-for-profits, it's a crime. I won't say it's a crime. It's a shame, because how can they plan for anything when they really don't know? And that's what we've been asking the governor to is, tell us where we're at. Tell us the numbers. Tell us what we've gotten, and we know what we've got.
So, Senator,
Go ahead.
All right. So, Senator-Elect, I want you to chime in on that as well, but can I add one other twist to this? And that is that whether there's a stimulus package agreed to between now and Christmas or now and New Year's, 3/4 of the state government's fiscal year will be over on January 1st. So you're at 75%. How do those not-for-profit school districts, municipalities, how should they plan?
Well, I agree with the Assemblyman that it's unfair. Many of these places are performing Herculean tasks, and that they're helping the neediest. They're helping the people that are really struggling. You know, the unemployment enhancements that were out there, okay, that may be masking a lot of the problems that are out there, and those things are going to lapse. So I don't have a great answer for it, but I will say this: when it comes out of you know, the executive office that we are going to delay payments to people, at some point that delay becomes a cut. And you know, regardless of what party you're in, not-for-profit school districts and the people that represent them are frustrated. They're frustrated because they want to know, and I want to know. And therefore, you know, if we get through that last quarter of this fiscal year, like you're talking about, and what is called a delay becomes a cut, something's got to happen before that. And that is where the legislature has to step in, and they have to step in before we hit the end of March here. They have to step in sooner. And that's what I'm hearing from my conference as well.
So before we get into next year, let's talk about, I want one more question on stimulus. I know I'm going to give you a choice you don't want to make. And we'll start with Senator-Elect first, because the Assemblyman took the last question, I think, first. If you had to make a choice in a stimulus package between aid to individuals directly, so this whole, whether it's $600, $300, or no aid or aid to municipalities and states, what's the priority for New York State?
Well,
in general,
I think it's
global.
I think it's going to be a combination. First of all, this may also be, you know, just like it's not a good choice, looking back in time isn't helpful either. But I will say that there was arguments made early on that we should just give these dollars to the people, not just a $1,200 stimulus, but even a more robust one, try to keep everybody from congregating, you know, and those are hard decisions to make. So I'm not being critical, but I do think that just like what we saw in Onondaga County, which is if they set these thresholds and the money doesn't go to the municipality, and it didn't go to Onondaga County because they're 40,000 people short. It went to Monroe County, it went to Erie County, and for us folks that represent smaller areas, smaller in population, that really hurts. So I do think that we have to help these municipalities, because they've got people that first of all, they need to be gainfully employed. They need to keep as many employees employed as they can, because that helps keep the economic wheels turning. And there's a lot of services out there that have to be provided to make sure that when people are struggling, we've got people there to do it. And I've watched during this crisis how you know, the Department of Health has functioned, about how other agencies have functioned. So instead of setting a bar and it almost be an all or nothing scenario, I believe municipalities have to be identify them, find out who's hurting, and make sure that there is, you know, a graduated amount of stimulus dollars that go to them, and not just you're one of the big boys and you get it, and you're a small town and you don't.
So the federal government, which they usually do with census information, gives it out to these large MSA areas because they have the super populations, and it may not trickle down to an Onondaga County, a Cayuga County, a Wayne County that way. So Assemblyman, that awful choice, if you had to prioritize aid to municipalities or individuals.
Well, that is a tough choice, of course. My gut feeling is it's got to be a compromise between the both of them, and then that doesn't answer your question. But my only concern there is if it goes to individuals, they can spend that money. There's tax money there. There's sales tax money. They can help their families. And the only issue with the municipalities right now is the governor can sweep some of that money back from the municipalities. We're hearing those numbers right now locally of taking, again, some sales tax money back to the state. So I have concerns if the local municipalities gets those dollars, that the governor's going to sweep some of that back to New York State. And at the local level, they just can't stand that. They have no other income coming in there. So I agree. I think it's got to go to the municipalities because they're hurting, and we'll get through this. But if the municipality's hurting, so are the residents of the municipalities. So I'd rather see a combination of straight through money to a check to the families, and then straight dollars to the municipalities, and not let the governor touch those dollars.
So for individuals, it would help prime the pump of the local economy. So let me ask this question. Does New York State, go ahead.
No, especially, we're seeing this right now with our landlords in upstate New York, where, rent's been held up. They have all their continued payments of everything, mortgage payments, interest, taxes, and they've got nothing to fall back on. If we're going to do it for one side, they got to do it for both sides. And that's something that we need to look at. Otherwise, they're not going to be around, and we're going to have a housing crisis.
So, I know we have this discussion at school districts, and we have it at the college, and we have it in counties and city government. There's a rainy day fund. Does the state have a rainy day fund?
Not that I'm totally aware of out there. I think that we're in a mindset of, tax and spend, use every dollar. And, I know, as being a former town supervisor, that the state looks down upon our small communities to having fund balances, but we have those fund balances there for situations like this to get us through them, so we don't have to take the high curve of taxing. And I think that the state needs to take a hard look at that, looking at the debt and looking at having, I don't like the word rainy day fund, but an emergency fund to get us through some of these things, because, whether it's a hurricane or a pandemic, we're going to continually have stuff like this that happens. And we had better have an emergency plan and some emergency funding there in place, long term.
So just so people may not be aware, when you're a town supervisor, there's a range that the New York State Comptroller tries to give you of what you can keep in a fund balance. You shouldn't go, if you give too much, you get dinged, and if you go too low, you get dinged. You get dinged anyway. Usually. Yeah. So why I asked this, and I'll ask this for both of you, we'll start with you, Assemblyman, was this issue of the governor talks about getting stimulus money and why we need money from Washington. And I don't disagree with that argument at all. But you do hear some people locally saying, we may not get anything from Washington. Should it be something where Albany needs to borrow to make up that difference for those contracts, at least that are let out right now? So you've got schools that, may have had a bit of a retainage. I'm hearing in some cases, the last quarter payments may have been stopped in some cases. So that's 25% of their budget, or they're delayed. Should New York, if worse comes to worse and there's no stimulus package, it's either, if Washington doesn't come up with it and the localities can't, should New York State figure out a way to get that money to those localities?
I think that they absolutely have to, whether you borrow the money or, as a businessman, I understand this. As a farmer, I understand this. When you get in tough times, you dump assets that you don't need. And New York State owns a lot of property that they do absolutely nothing with. The first step I would do as New York State would be to let's get rid of those properties. They own a lot of prisons that aren't being used right now. Let's put them on the market. Let's move them out. Let's get as much money back without putting that burden long-term on the taxpayers. But right now, New York State has an obligation to all the not-for-profits, the schools, the municipalities, to fund what they say they were going to do. And they need to step up to the plate and do that. We cannot put this on the taxpayers' back, especially short-term. I know long-term borrowing is tough, but we may need to do that. But let's have a 5-year or 10-year plan to look at that. And then again, let's look at what we can afford and what we can't afford. And yes, we're going to have to make some tough cuts. So let's make those cuts long-term and make this happen. We can do this. We have the ability, we have the people here, the businesses. Let's grow New York and let's make this happen. And that's what we have to do. We do that at our local homes in a crisis situation. So there's no reason why we can't do that at the state level.
Senator-elect, on this issue of made New York State have to just dig into its own pockets, which in the essence are taxpayers, but whether it's taking on debt or selling assets or whatever to make up that shortage.
So my understanding is that we have about $6 billion in reserve, and that is you know, it's good to hear that there's something there, but that's not going to cover us, you know. So obviously, like the Assemblyman said, there's going to be tough decisions to make, and I think we have to be creative and willing to break away from some of the things that maybe we're used to or we don't want to give up to get through the crisis. As far as borrowing goes, it's my understanding that there's you know, $11.5 billion dedicated towards short-term borrowing that could be extended towards long-term borrowing. And it, you know, why is that there? You know, I mean, nobody could have projected, or few would have projected, that we would be in the situation that we're in due to a global pandemic that we're still in the midst of, and hopefully we get through here. But I agree that we need a long-term plan with the expectation that, you know, there are ice storms, there are pandemics, there are, you know, other winter events or hurricanes that hit some areas of New York State, and that we have to be prepared. We have to make sure that we have a hefty fund balance and the ability to borrow, because, you know, other situations are going to happen in the future. So there is the borrowing ability. But if we're talking about a 2 or a 3 or 4 year thing, we're not going to be able to band-aid it with just the dollars that are there.
So Senator-elect, let me go back to you, because the Assemblyman doesn't get this call, and you're a Senator-elect, so you don't get this call yet, but you will be in the majority at some point. So we heard during the campaign, just before, about a month before the election, the governor said, we're not going to make any of these cuts or any of these changes before Election Day. We all understood that he wasn't going to implement the 20-20-20 cut, which was 20 education, 20 higher ed, 20 Medicaid. With that in mind, should the legislature go back now, and you know, as I was reminded this morning, it's only 11 days till Christmas by my 8-year-old. Should the legislature go back now, or should it have gone back now to start dealing with some of this stuff? Or do they have to wait? You know, you get sworn in around the 1st. There's a couple of days where there's a weekend. Then you have to wait, I think, Assemblyman, until the end of second or third or fourth week for the governor come up with a budget. Can you wait that long? Should we wait that long? I'll start with Senator-elect.
I think there's going to be agreement here that the answer is no. You know, the answer is no. And this is where I used the word delay before. The delay is concerned. If we're delaying those, is it a cut? And I think we need somebody to make a decision on that, because it certainly seems like a cut. And for the people that are trying to, you know, keep the lights on, it's a cut. So therefore, that conversation is occurring. I think, like you said, we're very close to Christmas here, which means, do we have to act prior to January 1st? Oh, there's a lot of support for that, I believe, in my conference. And I will also say that there was a conversation also about, you know, a Hail Mary at this point may not be, at a minimum, a very good look, and maybe we should have been there long ago.
So, I defer to Assemblyman, you are in the minority, so you don't get to call your conference back into session. What should the Assembly be doing, though?
We should have been back there months ago. Once we got through April, May, June, we should have been back in the summer, you know, meeting with the governor's office, talking about where we see we're going to go, what we're seeing in our districts, because New York State is so different, and we've asked for that, we've pushed for that, and I think there's members on both sides of the aisle that would like to do that. And I think that we need to be back in Albany doing this right now. Whether it's now or next week or after Christmas, we should be there because we need to know what's going on. We need to have an understanding so we can properly tell the people that are asking us the questions, the phone calls, where are we going to go as a state? What are you guys thinking? What are we looking at? And for one person to be doing this all the time, it's just hard for all of us locally to do our job, and that's what we're here for. So absolutely, we should be down there. And there's talk that the assembly might convene before the end of the year. We just heard that yesterday or today, I believe. So there's a possibility, but in my position, I just wait and see. But we're asking other members to make that happen.
So if the governor, so say there's no stimulus and let me give you the glass is not only half full, it's dirty, cracked, and leaking. You don't get anything from Washington. If the governor's talked about this 2020 cut across the board, is that something he can arbitrarily do in normal times, or even with these powers that the legislature gave him back, understandably, in March and April when the crisis first appeared? Or does he have to go back to your houses to get approval for those cuts going backwards? And I'll leave that up. I think we'll start with the Assemblyman on this. What's your conference's position on that?
I think as far as going back, right now he does have the power to do that. He's already sweeping some of that money now from the local municipalities and the schools. But I think moving forward, once we get into the budget process for moving forward 2021, I think that we need to do that together, and I think the legislatures should be doing that together with him. And I would think he'd need that approval through the budget process. That's where I feel, or I think that's where we're at right now. So that's kind of my position, I think, at this point.
Senator-Elect, please chime in.
Sure. So my understanding is this, and this is where, delaying is a bit of a finesse here, because if it's a cut and it's officially a cut, that my understanding is that then the legislature, both houses, have 10 days to act upon that. And so therefore, this is where that word delaying payments is a little off-putting, I think, because like the Assemblyman said, people need to know, we need to know, and people have been elected, and they've been elected to do a job, and as I ran for this seat, I said, yep, we needed quick, decisive decisions. True. But also, the legislature still has power in that if a cut occurs, they go back and then can act upon it.
But the worst time you would ever get that notice is if the governor wants to become reverse Santa Claus and give coal to everybody the 23rd of December. That really means the legislature has to go back by the 3rd of, I'm doing my math correctly, and I don't keep me to this, but basically that following January 1st weekend.
And there are conversations about the fiscal year too, so if we're going all the way to March 31 here, that if the clock is just run out and then the payment never comes, there's no ability for the legislature to act. And if I maybe kind of danced around that a little bit, that's what I mean, in that we can't wait too long. Otherwise, the authority that we've been given, we really have lost if that time lapses.
So with that, and both of you during the campaigns talked about this, you agreed with I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you both agreed that the legislature needed to give some powers to the governor immediately to deal with this crisis. And I think both of you gave him high marks initially for the health perspective here. But you also said that it's time for the legislature to get those powers back to the legislature. Why hasn't that been done? And again, you could use November election day is the day you weren't going to do it before, but it's been a month now. Still another 2 weeks before the new year. We're having a resurgence, obviously. Unfortunately, 300. I think I just saw we just crossed the 300,000 death threshold a couple of hours ago on Monday. Is it time for the legislature to go back and take those powers away, or should it wait till it reconvenes in January? I'll leave that up to either of you.
I can go first, Guy, if you want. Yeah,
Sure.
I think we need to, because right now with the hot spots and the spikes that are coming up, I think it's more important now to be together. And you know, me being in the minority, I can't call it back. It's going to be up to Speaker Hasty to do that. But I feel we should be back there. We should take some of those powers back, because we are elected to represent the people of our districts. And I don't want to not work with the governor. I want to work with the governor to find solutions. And I'm sorry, he can't make all those decisions from one location in New York State. We know what's going on in our districts. We know what our businesses are doing, what our schools are doing, what our families are doing. And he needs to rely on us to do that. So yeah, I think we need to take some of those powers back, because we're at a point in time now in the pandemic that we need to work together as a team, not just one.
So, Senator-Elect, before I turn to you, Senator, just are those powers, are the powers you're looking at mainly budgetary powers? What type of powers would you have the legislature? Because I'm not sure the general public knows to the nitty-gritty extent of what the legislature gave the governor. What powers are you looking more so to take back?
Right. I think what our discussion is about, and I think our focus is, because now that the numbers are starting to get floated out there, and also, you know, the delays in payments are relevant, that's what we're talking about here. And you know, as far as why have we or why haven't we, you know, it's no mystery. I'm relatively new to this. I've had good conversations and had those conversations with a lot of Senate leaders prior to election day or the certification of the election. But I know I'm not telling the Assemblyman anything here. I'm sure that there's conversations happening amongst leadership of the Senate and the Assembly and the governor's office, absolutely. And you know, I'm not going to be privy to those conversations, but I know that they are happening, and I hope that, you know, there's either an agreement reached, but if it's not to the satisfaction of the speaker or the majority leader, you know, they should call us back.
And so what are those specific powers that you would each take back?
I mean, I think I'll try to be quick. I mean, I think the budgetary issues are concerning for municipalities and school districts and other organizations, you know, and I think they want an answer. So I think we start there. You know, I know that there's frustration with some groups with the microcluster actions, right? And when you look at the numbers, you know, I think there's some positive aspects to addressing those and keeping things closed. There's also more research out there on where the virus is actually probably doing its spreading here. So, you know, I'm more focused on the budget area of it. There's frustration with somebody not being able to go open their business or open it in the manner in which they want to because they're stuck in an orange zone. And that's certainly relevant in Onondaga County. I see that all the time. So, you know, I'm not sure we're going to take those powers away, because I think the governor has some experts around him where he's trying to make the right call on those things. But the budgetary issues need to be transparent, and I think that's where the majority of people that I'm going to represent here very, very soon, they're worried about if they're knowledgeable about where the budget's headed.
So, Senator, the health side or the budget side or both? What are you looking?
Oh, I think more the
taking back.
I think right now it's the budget, because we're, like you said, we're entering the last quarter of the fiscal year here fairly soon, and we've got major budget challenges coming up. Districts, I'd say districts, but you know what I mean. Everybody's got a plan for their next year here, and they had already planned for the year where, you know, those dollars, if they're not going to come in, that's going to hurt and hurt quickly. They need to know. So I'm more focused on the budget side.
So, Assemblyman, before we turn to 21, 22, your feeling on what side, what powers are you looking at?
Definitely the budget side of it for sure, because if he continues to sweep this money from local municipalities, and it just leaves them all hanging, and we don't know, you know, what's going to happen in the future. But also, when he does his executive orders, you know, our regions, our areas are so different through New York State. When he does an executive order, it just blankets the state, and sometimes it's not the best thing for our area, or vice versa. It might not be the best for downstate. So I think taking some of those powers back as well, that, hey, before you make a statewide executive order, let's talk to the representatives. Let's run it through the Senate and the Assembly to find out, you know, what's their feelings, what are their thoughts. And I know we have to act quickly. I understand that, and that's why we gave them the powers. But I think at this point in time, just talking to the people around our district, that when he does this, it hurts a lot of businesses and families. And those are the people that we represent and that we're elected to do. And he needs to allow us to do that. So I think both sides, the executive powers and the budget, but probably a priority would definitely be the budget numbers.
So, Assemblyman, not to rain on the whole parade that 2020 wasn't bad enough, what's your conference looking at 21, 22? What's, you know, in the last 15 minutes we have, what are you looking at the outlook for?
Well, as we've said all along, Guy, I think the first thing we need to do is get back in Albany and find out what the numbers really are. You know, how much are we really in the deficit? And if this is what the numbers are going to be, then we need to start building long-term, you know, 5 years out. And if we're going to start looking at the next year's budget, we need to have some kind of an idea where we're at. How can you budget when you don't know? And I think that's what we're looking at different ways to accomplish moving out of the pandemic crunch that we're in without just raising taxes. You know, there's other ways of doing it. You know, businesses can still grow, and we need to help them do that. So that's kind of what we're looking at right now, looking long term and making sure we know the numbers, because if we don't know what to, you know, you don't know how to move forward.
So if I'm Neil O'Brien, who represents Port Barn that you represent, or Senator-Elect, you're going to represent Jeff Perazola in the Auburn School District, or at least part of it. If I'm going out there, they start putting their budgets usually together starting in January. And we may not even know what the 2021 budget will have looked like. What do you tell them to budget for 21, 22? Do you tell them stay flat, make a cut, hope that we're going to give you more aid? What do you tell them? We'll start with the Senator-Elect. I know you have a background in education, and then we'll go to the Assemblyman. Tell me what you're going to tell Jeff Perazola.
Sure. Well, I can talk about what I know was the conversation happening at West Genesee. Not that I was intricately involved in it, but I was certainly briefed on certain things, and it was very questionable then. But they made some hard decisions, knowing where we were, right as we were right at the edge of when the pandemic was hitting. And they made those decisions moving forward, and we would agree. There was promises made to that district, and we got to make sure that those promises are followed through on, because, you know, they're educating kids, and many of them in a much different way than they had before, with lots of challenges and picking up the ball in a lot of things. So I will say that these are smart people, and they understand budgets, and whatever advice I give them, I don't know. But I think they're going to be very careful. I don't think they're going to be overly optimistic, and that might mean flat or lower. I'm going to be a strong advocate to try to make sure that there is still proper funding when it comes to education. And I wouldn't be surprised, Guy, if you know, I'm not in those superintendents meetings that are connected to state government. But it seems as though, you know, from what we're seeing and the reactions that are happening out there about that happened in the city of Syracuse, or if we go further east into Whitesboro, when they're talking about furloughs, it seems like there's not a lot of optimism out there, and they're trying to prepare for some tough times ahead.
Before turning to the Assembly, I want to ask you a question because you mentioned financial aid. Obviously, one of the issues that you'll be dealing with is what Auburn has dealt with for at least since I want to go back at least since say 2008, and that's the aid formula where they think that they've lost millions upon millions of dollars. In a tight budget, is there any hope that they would get the fair shake that they've been hoping for in the past?
Yeah, I'll try to be quick on this one, which is they're right. First of all, Auburn is right. They've been hurt. It's well documented. It's been litigated. And I would say the one positive is that I finally believe that the task force that was going around the state really was committed to trying to get it right. Again, there's going to be a lot of issues that come up that that the answer is not this year, and I'm not privy to those conversations right now. But I would say that I think we're moving in the right direction, and I don't know. I don't know, but I do know that when I talk to the people who represent Auburn and they talk about programs that have been cut over time, they talk about large class sizes, decreasing services, it points right back to the invalid formula that is hurting them.
And I only bring that up because that was one of the discussions we had in September with the Wednesday morning roundtable. So Assemblyman, I would never want to get into a debate on education policy with Neil O'Brien, who represents Port Barn. But what would you be telling him right now?
I think at this point I would tell him.
And novenas don't count.
What's that?
Novenas don't count.
I think knowing what we know, talking to different school superintendents, I think their biggest, and then I'll answer your question, their biggest concern is not knowing what the cuts are going to be or what's going to happen. If they know what's going to happen, then they can plan accordingly. But I think right now I would tell him to look at least a 10% cut, because unless we know otherwise, I'd rather go to the side of caution than, flatline is one thing, but they're already not being paid for everything they're doing now. I just don't see that happening in the next year or two long term. So I would tell them to look at possibly making a 10% cut at this point, and maybe a little more. That's the direction the state seems to be going, and you can't show me something that's going to change that at this point, other than the bailout from the feds.
So I know Robert Auckman's trying to make us sound as good as we can, but all of us are in areas that are served by either some form of internet or broadband, and we apologize to the audience that we might be fading in and out from time to time. But right now, Assemblyman, Senator-Elect, you're a perfect example. You have a household with students, and there's only so much technology and charging you can get there. I'm assuming in Wayne County, it may even be worse with broadband. Districts are going to have to make major investments in where they haven't been able to make it, or they've done some patchwork since March. Aren't they going to be looking to the state for more aid for just that technology piece? How do we make that up so that you don't get the buffering little message that we've all been getting on and off over the last 45 minutes? And if I could, I'd start with the Assemblyman, because you represent a very rural part of maybe a more rural part of a district than the Senator-Elect does, though he has his own challenges with the city of Syracuse.
Yeah, absolutely. Internet is not a good situation in our rural areas. Throughout Wayne, Cayuga, and Oswego counties, there's parts that don't have it. But what I'm hearing from the family members is, and John, you're a teacher. Forget the internet. We want our kids back to school. We need to find a way to get these kids back in front of the teachers. The virtual teaching is not working. These kids are not getting the education that they need, and we need to take care of the internet, absolutely. But I think our job is to get these children back in front of their teachers, letting them being back in that environment and learning as much as they possibly can. That's what I'm hearing from the parents more, that, hey, we'll trade the internet for our children back in school. So yeah, we do need to continue to push for the internet.
But you do see,
Go ahead.
no, but you would see, do you see districts coming to you for that type of infrastructure investment from Albany?
Absolutely, especially if they continue to push virtual learning. But I'm hoping that with the outcomes of what we're seeing from our children, that will change. But right now, with the pandemic, yes, they've already talked about that, because some of our rural areas have taken hotspots out on their buses to give kids internet access, and it's just not working very well as we see today.
Right. So Senator-Elect, do you have a more of a mix of rural and urban? What do you see out there for school districts having that as a priority on their needs list, saying that we don't get vaccines into everybody, until June or the end of the year?
Yeah, so just about, there's no substitute for in-person learning, absolutely, and teachers are doing everything they can to make it work. I'm in a hybrid model, so I get some in person, but I agree there. On the other issue, I saw this when the first stimulus packages came out of the federal government. I think it's a great opportunity. I think when some of those dollars come and we're going to dedicate them in whatever way, we have to acknowledge that we've got to make sure that every household in this country has broadband, and they don't. And what I believe is that for the rural areas, that we want to make sure that people want to live there, because I lived here my whole life, and our area is a beautiful one. It has tremendous natural resources. We have to make sure that businesses like farming have every tool that they need so that we attract people to the area. And I think when those federal dollars come, if some of them are dedicated to a major broadband project for New York State, I'm supportive. I think in times of crisis like this, that's what they've done. And I hope to see that. And I would be supportive of it if it's done correctly. We want people here. We want businesses here. Poor internet access is not the way to do it. And I think that's something where it might push us to get it right.
So a national initiative like Eisenhower did with highways, Clinton did with the Erie Canal, this is an investment, period.
Yeah.
Even when your economy might not be the best.
It's tough. The dollars, the dollars are hurting, or, the dollars are going to, every agency, every municipality, every state, the federal government, we can't just keep printing money, right? But we got to survive. So if that money is going to go out there, dedicate it to making our areas better. I'm supportive of that. It puts people to work. It's not just a Band-Aid, it's a long-term mission so that our areas, whether they're urban or rural, have the ability to thrive.
Assemblyman, anything to chime in? And then I want to go back to the Senator-Elect on the issue of 21-22.
Well, just to again say what the senator just said about the internet access. We have it out here, but what we're finding is that the bandwidth isn't enough. I mean, when we're all online, we're not able to all do it. And the further out you are, the worse it is. So it's not only getting it out to the areas that need it, but the areas that already have it, we better expand that bandwidth. Otherwise, there's just not enough to go around. And I agree with the Senator-Elect. I would absolutely support that and push that we need to make that happen for all the businesses, farmers, families throughout our state. And I'm in full support of that.
So, Senator, I want to follow up on what I asked the Assemblyman a few minutes ago. What's your conference looking out as 21-22? I guess from a novice point of view, it would look like it's not really looking really good.
Yeah, if I can be a little self-deprecating here. You know, I mean, I want to serve the people of this district. I wasn't planning on a pandemic and an economic crisis, but I'm here to work at it, you know, so it doesn't look great. You know, we've got to look at both sides of the column, in my opinion, and I do believe the conference is going to advance things when it comes to negotiating that budget on both sides to try to not impact especially people like that live in my district and the Assemblyman's district and where we cross over, you know, so it's going to be some hard decisions and but you know, the outlook is a tough one.
Excuse me, when you say look at both sides of the ledger, you're talking about revenues as well.
Yeah.
So how do you increase revenues to say? So what is your conference looking at?
So there's a few things, but again, none of them are going to bridge that entire gap. So not to go into specific details, but I talked about this when I ran, and I talked about just restoring, bringing some of those tax rates, adjusting them a little bit for the ultra wealthy. And by that, we mean people making several $1 million a year. Not, you know, not to return them all the way to the numbers that the tax rates were in the 70s or 80s, but just bring them down a little bit, especially during a crisis, or change them a little bit so that it increases revenue. That will help. There are licenses that can be sold to organizations for additional casinos. I'm sure the Assemblyman is, you know, familiar with all of those things. In the future, I do think there's a likeliness that marijuana will be legalized and taxed. That's not going to be a quick fix. Mobile sports gambling is another. You know, there's a work group in the Senate majority to look at both sides. And of course, one of those sides is revenue increases.
So on just the issue of marijuana, and I'll let the Assemblyman chime in a moment. Just on marijuana, I think the estimate is that if you legalized it, it would be 300 million, and that would not be for a couple of years. But the bigger issue is the governor doesn't. The governor and the Assembly and the Senate don't seem to be on the same page of where that 300 million, if you could hit that target, would even go. Some are saying it should go to addiction programs. Some should be going to the general. I think the governor wants it in the general fund. Others want it for other purposes. So is it just the perspective that marijuana looks like a piece of a bigger revenue period piece that I think it's the old Everett Dirksen theory that if you know, $1 million here, $1 million there, and after a while you're talking about real money.
I mean, go ahead.
I think with the marijuana, I don't think that the $300 million will ever be reached. What I see in our rural areas is, you know, my concerns would be, first of all, policing it is going to be another situation in the schools if it's more readily available. But what I see is, my biggest concern is, you know, people aren't going to pay the money and pay the taxes on it. They're going to go to the black market marijuana, the homegrown behind the house. And how are we going to police all that? How is that all going to play into this? And what's good and what's not good? And then what's the extenuating cost long term for dealing with individuals that are addicted to it now and a gateway drug? So I just don't think that's the answer. I think that we need to look at the way we spend money in New York State and do a better job at it. We throw a lot of money out there at a lot of different projects that don't ever come to fruition. Let's look at those dollars first before we start trying to do this. I'm just not sure taxing it's going to be the answer. I just have concerns about that.
And I know this impacts your district specifically because of where you're located. What about additional, because we've seen what's been happening with Del Lago with employment and revenues, and of course the whole COVID issue in itself on top of that. Even prior to COVID, Del Lago was not meeting the financial targets that people were talking about. Do you think there is an appetite to open up more casino sites? Will that help revenues?
I'd have to see where they want to open them up. I think in our area, we have quite a few already between Del Lago, between the one down towards Syracuse, on the other side of Syracuse. I don't know how many you want to have. I think it's more important to get them open and get them used more than what we have. I think that if you really wanted to take a look at revenues, when the governor opened up the Indian reservations for the casinos during the COVID pandemic, I think they should have all been opened up at the same time at a reduced rate. The longer we leave businesses closed, the longer we lose revenue. And it just doesn't make sense that we can't open the same casino, the same facility, just because it's not on an Indian reservation. I think we should look at those things before we look at building more. And if we're going to build more, and I'm not saying I'm against it, but where are they going to go? Where's that money going to come from that's going to come into that casino? I think you really need to have an understanding of where the dollars are going to be coming from. Is it going to pull it from another casino, or is it just going to pull it from another state? If we can pull it from another state, that'd be great. That would be a positive, but I'm not saying I would be against it, but I think we really need to know where they would go.
Before turning to my last question for both of you, Senator-Elect, any thought on this issue of the casinos?
My understanding is that there's already agreement and sort of a moratorium on a timeline for opening up of giving other licenses, and those licenses would go to the New York City area. In my conversations, and I don't want to speak for these representatives of the casinos, but what I've heard is they're supportive because they would also receive, if it happens prior to what the timeline was, which was 2023, if any additional ones were opened, that they would receive a payment from those people that are requesting or paying for those licenses. So again, I'm not here to speak for the gaming authority or those already established casinos, but they would be downstate, and the belief is that they would not be taking business from our local casinos, especially Del Lago.
So, Senator-Elect, do you have any idea what committees you're going to be on?
I don't. There was just a request that came in that I completed and submitted, and I won't go full disclosure, but I feel very strongly about certain things. Education is one of those, and another one that's important to me is energy and telecommunications. Like I spoke to, one part of that is the broadband issue. The other one is that we have some great employers in the area that have incredibly high energy demands, and our energy here can be costly. So like the Assemblyman said, just like we need a vision long-term for the budget, I think we need a long-term vision when it comes to energy. So those, I haven't heard back because we just submitted them, but I'm excited to serve and excited to learn.
Yeah, isn't it's either one or two Nucor, maybe one or two on the high energy level when they light their burners. So Assemblyman, I want to ask you one last question. I'm going to let you both make closing comments in a bit, but one of your committees is on oversight, analysis, and investigation, which seems to be the broadest sweeping sentence or title I've ever heard. Is it likely that you will be looking at what the state has done in response to COVID, whether it's the governor or the legislature?
Guy, we've already did that with several different public meetings on that, looking into nursing homes, the hospital situation, where patients were going. So yeah, I do think we'll continue to do that. Whether I'll be on that one again, I don't know. But we will look at that, and I'm working across the aisle with the chairman there as well. And we should be looking at those and making sure that the things that are put in place were done right. The things that weren't, we need to know so we can make changes moving forward. So yes, we will be looking at other things, but we've already done that as well. So
you see it as a post 9/11? Where do we have holes in our process? Where do we do well, and so you plan for the next crisis?
I think it would behoove us to do that. Absolutely, we need to know what we've done wrong, what we can do to change things, how we can speed things up, and I think we can always learn from what we've done, and we will make sure that happens. And I'm looking forward to doing that.
So I want to finish off and just give you both the final word. We'll start with the Senator-Elect. Anything that we didn't cover on this issue of the outlook on the budget that we should be thinking about, whether we're taxpayers, run not-for-profits, we're on school boards, we have kids in schools, or any combination thereof.
You know, I really appreciate the opportunity to speak. And of course, I appreciate the opportunity to discuss with the Assemblyman. I look forward to working with him. And it's going to be challenging because what is concerning, and I don't want to continue to be, our conversation to be a glass half empty, but a lot of the things that have helped us get through, including extended unemployment benefits and including relief for renters and landlords, is that a lot of those things are lapsing. And people have to pay their mortgage, people have to pay their rent, and additionally, the people who own those properties that rent them out, they need help too. So the agencies that have done their job, it's really, we're at a very challenging time here as we reach the end of the year, and we may not know how bad it is right now. I know we don't know how bad it is. The federal government and the state government has done their best to keep things going and keep families okay, but we are still going to have a challenging year ahead of us outside of the budget because a lot of these places are struggling. So I hope to listen to everybody and represent this region, even if it is a troubling time, and do my best, and my staff do my best to help the people that are going to need it, because they are.
Assemblyman, you get the final word.
All right. Well, again, Guy, thank you, and thank you everyone for allowing us to be on. Senator-elect Robert and Jesse, thank you for allowing us to be on. I look at the glass half full. I've learned over the many years of being a farmer, when we've had bad years after year, that we always looked at it half full. So you learn from a crisis, you learn what you could do better, you learn what you made a mistake at. And in our area, we have a beautiful area, we have a great area, and we have some of the most remarkable business individuals, families, and just, we can do things in upstate New York that a lot of people can't do in the United States. And I really feel pretty positive about that. And I think it's time that when we have a crisis like this, we roll our sleeves up, like the Senator-elect said, that we roll our sleeves up, we dive right in, and let's do this. This is what we're elected to do. We're not just elected to get the photographs and be on the front page of the paper. We're here to represent the people that we elected us, and that's what I like. I'm a hands-on guy, and let's get this thing done, and let's do what's best for the people of upstate New York and New York. And I think with Senator-elect Mannion and myself, I think we have that same mindset, and we're going to be down there fighting for who we represent and making sure that long-term our children and our grandchildren have a place to be. So that's why I love doing this job. That's why I like doing this. And I'm excited about getting back to Albany and doing what needs to be done for the area.
I think that's a great way to end on an upbeat note for what's not been a great year. But we do want, the Wednesday Morning Roundtable wants to thank both Senator-elect John Mannion. Hopefully next time we see you will be officially senator. We'd love to have you come to our sessions. And of course, we want to thank Assemblyman Brian Manktelow, who we thank you both for giving your time. We hope you and your families are safe and stay safe as we get through this pandemic and get through the start of 2021 and beyond. We also want to thank our members for joining us today. We want to thank Tompkins Trust for their sponsorship. On behalf of the steering committee, want to wish all of you a happy Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, Christmas, and hope you have a great new year and a great 2021. And we'll see you back here in mid-January. Robert, I'll give it back to you. Thanks for doing all this, as well as to Jesse.
Thank you very much, Guy. Thank you, gentlemen, for your time today, and thank you for joining us for this bid program brought to you by Tompkins Trust Company. Our next video program will premiere on January 20th. It's featuring Ada and Sita's new Auburn Economic Branding Campaign. And once again, happy holidays from the Roundtable Committee, and hope everyone has a safe and happy holiday this year. Thank you.